everyone. I'm Anthony Pangelinan, Outreach Coordinator with the University of Alberta Career Center. Welcome to recruitment in the nonprofit sector during COVID-19. Now into its fifth month, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to affect our society, including the economy and employment. This includes recruiting by nonprofit groups who have seen their funding sources reduced during this crisis. The Career Center wanted to reach out to nonprofit employers to find out how they reacted and adapted to COVID-19, in particular, with regards to post-secondary recruiting and hiring. It is our goal to share these insights with students and grads so that they may gain an understanding of the situation with nonprofit employers while hopefully providing some optimism. We also hope that by sharing their perspectives, this will provide nonprofit employers a way for them to connect with students. Today, we have Violet Poon, Human Resources Consultant for the Edmonton Human Resources Cluster, which encompasses several nonprofit groups. Thank you for being with us today, Violet. We're happy to have you share your thoughts, your insights during COVID-19 with us and U of A students.
Thank Violet, you very much for having me.
Thanks. Violet, could you give a brief introduction on your role?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do so. So I recruit on behalf of 4 nonprofits here in Edmonton. The 4 organizations are Boyle Street Community Services, Norwood Child and Family Resource Center, the Edmonton John Howard Society, and Terra Center. So it kind of has, my position was created because at the time they were, over the years, there were smaller organizations and they did not have HR on staff. But now that's kind of changed. Some of the organizations do have HR on staff. However, they utilize me in a shared service model to recruit on their behalf. So I do all of the recruiting, and I also do some supports with regards to training and development, and some supports with coaching of the managers as well.
Thanks. What is the recruitment process like in the nonprofit sector? And of course, how has it changed during the pandemic?
Yeah, so not a whole lot has changed during the pandemic, although we have seen some increase of hiring for specific types of programs and positions, and then a decrease for some other type of positions. So I'll go through a little bit about the process and then talk about what some of those roles have been. So for us, because I do kind of all that centralized recruiting, there's the formality of like doing the job posting it on various sites. We do also post many of our jobs on the campus bridge, the U of A site as well, which is really great to attract students. So I actually go through and receive all of the applications and resumes. So I will look at every application, and then I do look at I compare it to the job posting, and if candidates meet some of the qualifications, then they will be screened in for the hiring managers to view those applications. The hiring managers will view those applications, and then we do have a pre-screen process as well. So I do pre-screen all candidates that are selected by the hiring manager to be pre-screened and ask a number of questions, and typically arrange for interviews. And the interviews have not been taking place in person, but we've been using technology to support us with that. I also typically do the reference checks, and then we hire people. So it tends to be a fairly quick process. As I mentioned, there were some positions that we needed to recruit for a very timely, very quickly. For example, at the Edmonton Expo, we hired people to work in the isolation unit, the center there. And so we need to hire a high number of individuals in a very short period of time. And with the Edmonton John Howard Society, they also have residential programs. So some things changed around there as well. So we needed to hire quite a few number of people in a short period of time as well. So I would say the process didn't really change too much. Just some of the jobs, I think, that I recruit for changed a little bit.
I think you've already answered most of this question. And the next question is, what tools are you using to connect with potential applicants in addition to soliciting applications to advertised positions? So you mentioned already posting on job sites like Campus Bridge. Are there any other tools that you've been using to connect with potential applicants?
Yeah, actually, for the nonprofit sector, there's a few websites that we do tend to post on. One is workatnonprofits.ca. Another one is the ECVO, Edmonton Chamber of Voluntary Organizations. They have a job line, so on their website as well. Because many of our positions, we do like to attract either university students, post-secondary students, or graduates. We do post on post-secondary job boards as well. And during this pandemic, I would say there's been a number of just organizations that support job seekers that have been really great in doing virtual events. So whether that be Facebook Live events, whether that be Zoom meetings where they're inviting job seekers to come and join, and for me to share information about the jobs and about working in our sector. So we've had to be a little bit creative, but I think there's still ways to connect with job seekers right now, and you just have to kind of find a way to be able to do that.
That's awesome to hear. Now, these the next three questions are related, so bear with me here.
Yeah.
Are the organizations doing phone or video interviews?
So most of the organizations are using various platforms to do video interviews with the ability to hear and see candidates. So it could be via Google Meet, it could be Zoom, it could also be Microsoft Teams, I believe it is the name of it. So it could be primarily any one of those three platforms that they've been doing, so that they can still have, be able to see people and hear them and have a panel interview just like they would if they were all in the same room. So I think most of them have actually used kind of a different a virtual platform. I don't think many of them, I think phone is kind of the secondary choice. If the virtual platform isn't available, or people don't maybe have reliable internet, then that could be a secondary choice.
And going further with that, how do you perform reference checks while the majority of people are working from home?
Actually, it hasn't been an issue at all. What we do is we typically ask for 3 professional references that would include supervisory references, and we do ask for email address and telephone number. Because people were not really sure of people's availability, people have needs at home as well. So what I do is I email the references and I schedule a phone call in advance. So I haven't had any issues with people, working from home or working remotely and not being available to provide a reference. I think that most people, if they provide a reference, they've been really willing and open to, take a call whenever it's convenient, for mutually convenient time for both of us.
Great. Now, are reference letters acceptable?
Candidates do provide reference letters, which certainly is a nice add-on, but because we ask specific questions of our references, we do contact them. So ideally, it is having a phone conversation. However, sometimes I know that people might not be available. And so if we ask for 3 professional references and we have 2 that I've spoken to over the telephone, it may be acceptable to do one via email where the reference will complete the check and then email it back to me. It's also really great now with technology. I'll also add this as well, because sometimes people have references from actually outside of Canada. There was references I recently did of somebody that was 9 hours ahead of Edmonton time, and I was able to have phone conversations with them using the WhatsApp. So I was able to do audio calls with them and do a reference just like I would for anybody that was here locally, for example. So I think technology has been really positive that way and really great. You can still connect with people.
Yeah, that is great to hear, especially for those if your references are several different time zones away, or let alone in another continent. So that's great.
Yeah.
So I know it's probably a little difficult right now. How or what does onboarding look like now?
I think that that's been a little bit of a challenge. Recruiting and hiring has not stopped at all in the last, five months or so during the pandemic, and it will still continue on. So we're still going to have jobs that we're looking to hire for, jobs that are working in the community, working with participants, working with children and families. So I think initially when people were working remotely and offices were closed, and we were still doing hiring, I think the onboarding was a little bit of a challenge because you have to look at all the different ways to go through that process with people if you're not having them come into an office and being there on a day-to-day basis kind of thing. So I think that one of the challenges for the hiring managers is kind of when we're hiring somebody and they're spending part of that time working remotely, but they're a new employee, is it clear in terms of what those expectations are? What are the expectations that we have in terms of what the work is, but also in terms of working remotely? Because we know that people, like I said, we know that there's lots of needs at home with family. So I think it's been a little bit of a challenge initially when people were only working from home and remotely. But now some of my clients and offices have opened, whether their staff are back working full time or alternating, working part time at home and part time in the office. I think it's made it a little bit easier so that when you're hiring new staff, they are coming in and you're able to kind of maintain that physical distance and take those precautions, but still have that face-to-face time to be able to provide them with information about expectations of the job, doing any type of like training. Some of the positions I recruit for also have what we call a job shadow. So that really hasn't changed too much. Giving you an example, like in our residential programs at the Edmonton John Howard Society, they are 24-hour operations, and so they do incorporate job shadows into that, so that people do come in and they get exposed to see what this position is like. And then an opportunity to see if it's for them or not, right? So I think that that's important, and they've continued that process as well. So I think it's kind of resuming to what it was prior to the pandemic.
Great. And job shadowing is definitely a great way. And of course, as yeah, I know you're aware, we do job shadowing twice a year. Although we're revamping it this year due to the pandemic, and we're rejigging it as we speak. Still, job shadowing is a great way for especially students to find out if this is what they're looking to do down the road, whether it's a temporary job for the next year or so or a career down the road.
Yeah.
And my last question is, what jobs or strategies would you suggest to use when looking for a job in the nonprofit sector during a pandemic, whether it's students or even recent grads or any type of jobs you are coming out right now?
Yeah. So one of my organizations, Boyle Street Community Services, we did have some funding to hire summer students. So we were really fortunate to have 4 students that we hired this summer, which is always great. So I would say if people are looking at the nonprofit sector, students or graduates, really like the websites that I mentioned. So workinnonprofits.ca, the ECVO job line, the career bridge that I post the jobs as well. So have a look at those. If people have questions, I mean, my email address is listed on almost all of the job postings. Very rarely does the hiring manager put their email address on the job. So if people have questions, feel free to email me, because I look at every single application. It comes into my inbox. So we don't use an applicant tracking system or anything like that. So I think in our sector, it's a lot about relational work and working with people. So I try to make myself as accessible as possible in that way, and look at opportunities to connect with students, using different modes, right? So whether it be different virtual events nowadays or different things, I want to be available to them if they do have questions or a resource. So I think it's important to kind of look at all of those in terms of a traditional job search. What I also highly recommend to people is start, as a student and a graduate, start really thinking about the type of jobs that would be of interest to you. And we know that not everybody's going to know all the different jobs in our sector and have exposure to that. But maybe start looking at, different organizations that have different causes and visions that are aligned to who you are as a person and what your values are. So as value-driven organizations, it's really key in terms of our hiring that we have people that are aligned personally and professionally to our values. So really looking at nonprofit organization websites, what do they do? Who are the community members that they serve? Their values are typically posted on their websites. Have a look at that. If it really resonates to you, then I really encourage people to apply or reach out to the HR person or whoever's doing the hiring if possible, if you have questions. But really emphasize in your application how the alignment of the organization values aligns to who you are. I think that's a unique thing, I think, in our sector that we really look for, because we know that not everybody may have all the experience or education that an ideal candidate has, but if they have that alignment with the values, that's pretty important for us. So I often tell job seekers to really pay attention to that and really kind of emphasize that. Also in our sector, we do tend to hire a lot of students and also new graduates as well in various programs. So whether that be programs related to anything related to like human services, psychology, human ecology, native studies, there's some great kind of programs, and sometimes people may not know how their education can kind of apply into work. So we do think there's some really great knowledge, skill, and skills that people have as university students and graduates that they can apply into our sector. So giving you an example of some of the positions that I recruit for students, I mentioned this a couple of times now, but those residential programs with the Edmonton John Howard Society, they're really great because you are working in a team. It's a lot of it tends to be weekend and maybe evening work, sometimes overnight work. So I find that it tends to kind of work with the schedule of a student if they're attending classes during the day. And as part-time work, it's, we're kind of cognizant and aware of the commitment that students can make as well. So it might be a couple of shifts a week, right? And they're getting some experience of working with maybe the vulnerable or marginalized population. They're working in a team. So there's a lot of, I think, skill development that can take place as well. And it gives you kind of exposure to see what our sector is like and what this job is like. And sometimes when people graduate, they may move on to full-time employment with the organization, or they look at other opportunities within our sector. And they have some of that skills that experience that they've gained through working in a part-time while they've been studying. So there are positions, like with John Howard, there are positions, for example, with Boyle Street, when the drop-in center is open, extended hours during the winter time. And it's supporting people that may not have a place to go, so we extend those hours. We also do a very kind of a hiring of quite a few people, typically between 20 and 30 people. And that would usually start in, say, September, maybe early October. So again, I do find there's quite a few students or maybe newer graduates that apply for that position as well. And again, I think it's just great experience to get to kind of see where you might, where there might be a fit for you as well, yep. Right? And get some of that experience, and that being a temporary position as well, just would be great because people can work while they're going to school, as the position tends to end at the end of April.
Well, thank you. That's all the questions we have. I actually always recommend to students or recent grads that working in nonprofits is a great way to go. There's lots of, and you mentioned human services, there's also other areas that they may need staff, whether it is IT. I've known nonprofit groups who need that IT experience, and it's just hard to sometimes recruit for that IT person if they're going other organizations. Yet they'll get immersed into so many roles within a nonprofit group within IT or communications.
Yes.
There are lots of great roles in nonprofit groups to work into communication. So, uh, nonprofit groups have always been a great place to get that experience and get yourself right in there. So I really appreciate the time taken to chat with us today and talk about recruiting with nonprofit groups during these trying times. So thank you again, Violet. Really appreciate it, and all the best.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anthony, for having me. And like I said, if people have any questions, they're welcome to contact me. And my website that I maintain on behalf of my organizations is careersforcommunity.ca.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Actually, I'm going to tweet that out. Sorry, communities for.
Sorry, careersforcommunity.ca.
Great. I'll.
Yes.
We've got a Twitter account here at the Career Center.
Great.
I'll tweet that out.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay. Take care. Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.